Ah, nostalgia. The one marketing trick that never gets old. Literally, Hollywood has been cashing in on our collective childhood memories for decades. And honestly, they're better at it than your mom digging out embarrassing baby photos at Thanksgiving. These days, it feels like every new movie or show is actually just the ghost of something you vaguely remember loving as a kid, polished up and paraded around like a greatest hits album. But instead of leaving you with that warm and fuzzy feeling, it's more like watching your favorite band reunite after 30 years. It's familiar, sure, but you can't shake the feeling that something's missing. It's almost like Hollywood accidentally hit shuffle on their archives and thought, you know what? This could work again, just with 30% more CGI and 80% less originality. But why do we fall for it? Why does it work every single time? I mean, let's be real. Most of us have rolled our eyes at a reboot announcement at some point. We've groaned on social media, vowed to never support it, and declared Hollywood out of ideas for the 100th time. And then, 6 months later, there we are, sitting in the theater, ticket in hand, popcorn ready, convincing ourselves that this one might actually recapture the magic. It's not like we don't know better. Deep down, we know that what we're chasing probably isn't the movie itself. It's the feeling that the movie gave us the first time around. That's the real power of nostalgia. Nostalgia doesn't just remind us of the past, it romanticizes it. Takes us back to a time when life was simpler, when our biggest worry was getting to Blockbuster before they ran out of copies of The Lion King. And Hollywood knows this. They don't just sell us movies, they sell us a time machine, warped in 4K resolution. Think about it. How many times have you heard the phrase, this brought me back to my childhood? That's not an accident. Hollywood carefully reconstructs every little detail to trigger those memories. The theme music, tweaked to sound just familiar enough to make you misty-eyed. The characters, aged up versions of your childhood heroes, ready to give you a hug as you're handing over your wallet. And honestly, it's genius. Nostalgia taps into that warm, fuzzy corner of our brains where the stress of adulting doesn't exist. It whispers, hey, remember when you didn't have bills, deadlines, or 3 different streaming subscriptions? Let's go back there for a bit. And of course, the kicker is that nostalgia isn't just emotional, it's biological. Our brains are wired to attach more weight to happy memories from our past, especially from childhood. Psychologists even have a term for this. It's the reminiscence bump. Basically, stuff we loved as kids stays locked in our brains, like a greatest hits playlist, no matter how cringy it might be now. And Hollywood, they're the DJ, playing that playlist on repeat, banking on the fact that we can't resist a trip down memory lane. Hollywood doesn't just dabble in nostalgia, they've mastered it. They've gotten it down to a science. And I wouldn't be surprised if somewhere in LA there's an actual Hollywood nostalgia playbook locked away in a vault. And if that playbook were to exist, I'd imagine it would read something like this. Step 1. Dust off an old franchise, ideally something from the 80s or 90s, that's had just enough time behind it to feel iconic. Step 2. Assemble the cast. You'll need 2 things, a fresh, diverse group of newcomers to appeal to a younger audience, and at least one original star who looks like they got yanked out of retirement. Bonus points if it's someone like Harrison Ford, who always just seems thrilled to be there. Step 3. Add a heaping spoonful of callbacks. It doesn't matter if they make sense, or if they add anything to the story. Throw them in there. Iconic lines, old props, maybe even a dramatic zoom in on the original logo. The goal isn't subtlety, it's to get the audience to nudge the person next to them and whisper, hey, I remember that. Step 4. Modernize the visuals. Forget practical effects. It's all about CGI now. Because nothing says nostalgia like your childhood heroes being chased by a green screen monstrosity that looks like it escaped from a video game beta. Step 5. Repeat as necessary. If the reboot or sequel makes money, congratulations! You've just unlocked the franchise mode. Keep pumping them out until you've turned a beloved classic into an assembly line product. Sure, the fans might start to lose faith, but as long as those box office numbers stay strong, who really cares? Not the Fast and Furious franchise. Hollywood's been running this playbook for decades, and we keep falling for it. Why? Because they know exactly how to hook us by dangling just enough old magic to make us believe it's still there. But you see, the thing about Hollywood's nostalgia playbook is that it works up until it doesn't. Because let's be honest, for every Top Gun Maverick that soars, there's a Ghostbusters 2016 waiting to haunt your dreams. Nostalgia may be a powerful tool, but it's not foolproof. And when it backfires, it can be a train wreck of epic proportion. So when does it go wrong? Let's break it down. Sometimes Hollywood focuses so much on the callbacks, Easter eggs, and familiar visuals that they forget to tell a good story. It's like getting a beautifully wrapped present that's empty inside. I'm looking at you, Space Jam: A New Legacy. These movies rely on surface level nostalgia to distract you from the fact that there's nothing underneath. Sure, they've got Bugs Bunny, Michael Jordan, oh wait, no, LeBron James, and 1,000 cameos, but what they're really missing is heart. Then there are the movies that try to reinvent the wheel, but they just end up crashing the car. Instead of honoring the original, they throw out everything that made it special and slap the name on a completely different product. It's like ordering pizza and getting a salad with pepperoni on top. And then there are those franchises that just don't know when to quit. They milk the nostalgia so hard that it sours, leaving fans exhausted. Yes, I'm talking about Transformers, the aforementioned Fast and Furious, and honestly, The Simpsons at this point. It's like watching a boxer past their prime step into the ring again and again. At first, you're rooting for them, hoping they'll recapture the magic. But after a few too many ugly losses, all you're left with is the sad realization maybe they should have hung up the gloves a few rounds ago. When nostalgia goes wrong, it doesn't just fail as a movie, it can tarnish the legacy of what came before. Instead of elevating the original, it drags it down with it. But even when it fails, Hollywood keeps trying because they know there's always someone willing to buy a ticket. The question is, how much more can they milk nostalgia before the audience starts to walk away? Well, when it comes to TV, the answer seems to be not anytime soon. Because while movies are able to hit us with short bursts of nostalgia, TV takes the long road, wrapping us in serialized stories that keep us coming back week after week and year after year. TV shows have mastered the art of serialized nostalgia. They're not just dipping into the past, they're inviting you to settle in and stay for a while. And unlike movies, they've got time on their side, delivering just enough nostalgic highs over the entire season to keep you hooked. Serialized nostalgia works differently because TV shows aren't just entertainment, they're comfort food. They become part of your daily or weekly routine, so when a beloved show gets revived, rebooted, or even reimagined, it doesn't just tap into the memory of the show itself, it brings back the rhythm of watching it. And unlike movies,
Hey
TV has
everyone,
time on its
I'm
side.
back.
Shows can stretch out that nostalgic high over an entire season. Each episode becomes a breadcrumb, leading you to a deeper past, with just enough cliffhangers and callbacks in each to keep you clicking next episode. Legacy sequels are where TV really thrives. You're not just revisiting old characters, you're seeing how they've changed, how they've grown, or sometimes how they've stayed exactly the same. It's like catching up with an old friend, except for this friend has a multi-million-dollar budget and a writing team behind him. We could take a look at that 90s show, The X-Files, or we could look at Fuller House, which somehow made us nostalgic for corny life lessons delivered by Danny Tanner. But not every reunion feels like a heartwarming catch up. Sometimes it's more of a bait and switch, dangling a few fleeting moments of magic in front of us before fading back into mediocrity. Take Kenobi or Ahsoka. When Disney brought back young Anakin Skywalker for a flashback in Ahsoka, the internet exploded. You couldn't scroll through TikTok or YouTube Shorts without seeing the same few seconds of that scene replayed over and over. It was the kind of nostalgia that hit so hard even the casual fan couldn't look away. But here's the problem. Those moments, while great, are rarely the norm. They're the bait. The rest of the show is a lot of filler. A lot of slow paced and overall feeling of why am I still watching this? It's like buying tickets to see your favorite band only to find out they're playing one hit song and spending the rest of the concert on an experimental jazz flute. In Kenobi, it's the same deal. Fans were hyped to see Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen back on screen, but aside from a few moments, it felt like the magic had been stretched too thin. These shows know how to sell you on nostalgia, but delivering it on an entire season? That's another story. The truth is, a lot of these shows feel like calculated cash grabs. Studios know clips of your fan favorite characters will dominate TikTok and YouTube. Old fans will return, excited to relive the magic, but most of the time they're left disappointed when only a few scenes manage to recapture the spark of the original. Even when they don't fully deliver, the strategy still works. Those few standout moments are enough to keep audiences engaged, for now. But the more studios lean on nostalgia without adding something truly fresh, the faster audiences will start to catch on. Then there are shows that don't just revive old characters, they revive entire formats. Take Stranger Things, for example. It doesn't just feel like the 80s, it is the 80s, complete with synth heavy music, walkie talkies, and kids on bikes solving mysteries. Watching it feels less like a Netflix binge and more like dusting off an old VHS tape. Or look at WandaVision, which used sitcoms from every era to tell its story. It wasn't just nostalgic for the sake of it, it used those formats to explore themes of grief and escapism. That's when nostalgia works at its best, not as a gimmick, but as a storytelling tool. But just like movies, TV shows can fall into the trap of overstaying their welcome. How many shows have started out strong only to lose steam after the nostalgia runs out? Serialized nostalgia works until it doesn't. If the story drags on without adding anything new, the magic will fade, and all you're left with is a show that feels like a shadow of its former self. TV nostalgia works because it's not just about the past, it's about the promise of something more. More episodes, more stories, more time with the characters you fell in love with originally. But when that promise gets stretched too thin, even the most beloved shows can turn into a chore. Hollywood may have a playbook, but TV is playing chess, moving pieces to keep us hooked for the long haul. The question is, how many moves do they have left before the game gets stale? So we've talked about Hollywood's playbook, TV's ultimate strategy, and when nostalgia works and when it flops completely. But there's an uncomfortable truth that we must face. If cash grabs keep happening, is it because we're letting them? The harsh reality is, Hollywood doesn't keep pumping out these nostalgia driven projects because they love your childhood. No, they're doing it because we, the audience, keep showing them whether it's out of genuine excitement or morbid curiosity. They know that as long as there's demand, there will be supply. Think about it. If every time we watch a trailer for a legacy sequel or binge a rebooted TV show or flood TikTok with clips of our favorite nostalgic moments, we're telling studios, yes, please, more of this. Even if in the end the result is mediocre, the initial hype already paid the bill. It'd be like going back to an ex, not because you think it'd be better this time, but because you're chasing a feeling you had in the beginning. Social media only makes it worse. Nostalgia spreads like wildfire on platforms like TikTok and YouTube Shorts. One clip of Luke Skywalker showing up in The Mandalorian gets millions of views, and suddenly every studio is scrambling to replicate that moment. But here's the catch: studios aren't looking to recreate quality, they're looking to recreate virality. If a single scene can generate millions of views and buzz, they don't care if the rest of the show feels like it was written on a napkin 5 minutes before filming started. The other part of the problem is us. We romanticize the past to the point where we ignore the reality of it. The shows and movies we grew up loving weren't always flawless, but in hindsight, they feel untouchable. So when studios announce a reboot, we project all of those feelings onto the new version, expecting it to capture the same exact magic. And when the reboot doesn't deliver, we feel betrayed, even though deep down we probably knew it wouldn't live up to our impossibly high expectations. Finally, let's be honest. Nostalgia is safe, the world can feel chaotic, and so it's no surprise we're drawn to the familiar. Watching a reboot or a sequel lets us revisit a simpler time, or at the least an illusion of it. The problem is when we cling to nostalgia too tightly, we miss out on new ideas, new stories, and new characters that could become the next generation's nostalgia. Instead of looking forward, we keep hitting rewind. So are we the problem? Maybe. Studios keep milking nostalgia because it's profitable. But that's only true because we keep buying in. At some point, we have to ask ourselves, do we really want more of the same, or are we ready to let the past be the past? So, is nostalgia always a bad thing? Of course not. When done right, it's a celebration, a reminder of why we fell in love with something in the first place. Movies like Top Gun Maverick and shows like Cobra Kai don't just play the hits, they build on what came before, adding new layers that make the story feel fresh again. It's like catching up with an old friend who's actually grown, someone who's learned from their past instead of just rehashing it. But for every Cobra Kai, there's a dozen reboots, sequels, and spin offs that don't know when to stop. And we've seen what happens when franchises are milked dry. It's like watching that legendary boxer step into the ring one more time. And let's be real, we're not blameless here. Hollywood keeps going back to nostalgia because it works. We keep showing up hoping for that rare spark of magic, even when we know deep down we're probably getting more filler than fire. Every ticket we buy, every clip we share, tells studios that this strategy is worth repeating. Nostalgia isn't inherently good or bad, it's just a tool. And tools can be used to create something meaningful or to hammer the same nail into the ground over and over. The question we need to ask is how much more can Hollywood pull from the past before we're ready to move on? Maybe it's time for all of us, studios and audiences alike, to stop looking back and start looking forward. Because while it's nice to revisit the past, the stories that really stick with us are the ones that dare to do something new. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Till next time, I'm out of here.